What if Roronoa Zoro, the king of hell himself, was reborn at the very beginning of his story with every power, every technique, and every memory he'd earned across his entire journey? What if the Zoro who woke up tied to that post in Shell's Town wasn't a scrappy, hungry bounty hunter, but a fully realized monster who'd already stared down Kaido and walked away? Would One Piece have been a completely different story? Would the Grand Line have trembled from day one? And most importantly, would any of it have still meant something? Well, I found 3 different theories about how this alternate timeline could have played out, and trust me, each one hits harder than the last. In the first scenario, the entire East Blue saga ends in about a week, and not in a good way. When Luffy and Kobe arrive at Shell's Town on day 9 of Zoro's captivity, they find a man who's not actually starving, he's just waiting. A reborn Zoro with full memories and power could have snapped those restraints anytime he pleased. His armament hockey alone could shatter the bindings like thread, but here's the twist. He'd remember everything. He'd remember that this exact moment is when he first joined Luffy, and some part of him would wait, because he already knows what this kid grows up to become. He'd let Luffy untie him, he'd take his swords, and then, when Helmeppo ran off to get Captain Morgan, Zoro wouldn't even need to draw Enma. He'd knock out every single Marine in that base with a single, unconscious pulse of Conqueror's Haki before Morgan could even raise his axe. Shell's Town would fall in 30 seconds. Here's where the timeline collapses on itself. Zoro would join the crew with full memories of every crewmate they'd recruit and every enemy they'd ever face. When Buggy shows up in Orange Town, Zoro wouldn't waste a moment. He'd cut Buggy into pieces so fast that the clown wouldn't even have time to summon his crew, ending the arc before Nami even has a reason to introduce herself properly. The Syrup Village arc, Kuro wouldn't get his dramatic speech. He'd be on the ground before the Black Cat pirates even landed. But here's the critical problem. Zoro's power, used this freely and this early, would completely destroy the meaning of the journey for everyone else. Luffy wouldn't grow, Sanji wouldn't have his moment against Pearl, Nami wouldn't have the tearful breakdown that earns her the crew's loyalty. Every character's defining struggle would be solved before it began, replaced by Zoro casually ending fights in one move. When they finally reach Mihawk, who Zoro already knows and has already surpassed in his memories, there'd be no dramatic duel, there'd be no legendary scar. Zoro would simply defeat the world's greatest swordsman in the East Blue with 0 audience, 0 weight, and 0 ceremony. By the time they reached the Grand Line, the crew would be powerful but hollow. They'd be a group of people who never truly earned their victories. Luffy wouldn't have developed the resolve that makes him terrifying, Usopp wouldn't have found his courage at Syrup Village, and an overpowered Zoro carrying everyone on his back would create not a Pirate King's crew, but a dependency. The Straw Hats would arrive at every island less like adventurers and more like a cleanup service. This timeline produces a world that's technically safer, but narratively dead. Power without earned struggle isn't a story, it's just a list of casualties. In the second and darkest scenario, reborn Zoro decides early that waiting for the story to unfold naturally is a luxury the world can't afford. He has the memories, he knows every tragedy that's coming, he knows about Marineford, he knows Ace dies, he knows Robin gets hunted for 20 years, he knows what Kaido does to Wano, and he decides, before Luffy even has found a navigator, that he's going to fix it. This Zoro would leave the crew after Shell's Town, not because he doesn't care about Luffy, but because he cares too much to watch everything burn when he can stop it. He'd go straight to the New World, alone, with Enma, Wado Ichimonji, and the Sandai Kitetsu already mastered, with advanced Conqueror's Haki already awakened, and with the King of Hell 3-sword style fully operational, Zoro would be a walking extinction event. His first target would be Wano, years before the raid on Onigashima. He knows the layout, knows Kaido's weaknesses, knows the timing. He'd challenge Kaido directly, and unlike the original story where it took a combined effort of Luffy, the Scabbards, Yamato, and the entire Wano liberation movement, this Zoro would go in swinging. The fight would be the most brutal thing the world had ever seen. A lone swordsman with the power of a future legend against an emperor in his homeland. But here's the cruel miscalculation. Power alone is never enough against Kaido. What defeated Kaido in the original story wasn't just Gear 5 Luffy. It was 2 years of Wano's people clinging to hope, Momonosuke awakening his dragon form, and Yamato holding the island together while Luffy recovered. Zoro fighting alone without that foundation, without Luffy's Conqueror's Haki flash to stagger Kaido repeatedly, could absolutely injure him, but killing him would be another matter entirely. Kaido endures, and Zoro, without backup, no matter how powerful, would eventually run dry. Kaido would be bleed badly, and then he'd make an example of him. The ripple effects of this would be catastrophic. With Zoro captured and broken in Wano, Luffy would arrive in the Grand Line without his first mate, without his anchor, without the man who absorbs Luffy's pain and simply says, "Nothing happened." The crew that forms would never feel complete. When Luffy eventually hears what happened to Zoro, his grief would transform into something closer to vengeance than adventure. The Straw Hats would still reach the New World, still challenge the Emperors, but with a fury and a recklessness that costs them more than it should. Whole arcs would be rushed, mistakes would be made, people would die who didn't need to. In the third and most fascinating scenario, Reborn Zoro plays it smart. He remembers everything, yes, but he also understands something that took the original Zoro years of bloodshed to learn: that a sword is only as good as the hand that wields it, and the hand is only as steady as the heart behind it. This Zoro stays. He keeps his mouth shut about what he knows, he lets Luffy be Luffy, he lets the adventure happen, but this time, in every fight, Zoro isn't catching up, he's holding back. The first place this changes everything is at the Baratie. When Mihawk arrives and that legendary duel's about to start, the Reborn Zoro would feel the instinct to simply end it in 3 seconds, but he wouldn't. He'd fight Mihawk at a level just above his original self, enough to earn real respect, enough to make Mihawk pull out Yoru genuinely, but he would take the scar. Take it on purpose, because he remembers what that scar means. He remembers the vow he made lying in his own blood, that he would never lose again. He made that same vow, and this time it would be backed by the knowledge of exactly how far he'd grow to fulfill it. The scar wouldn't be a defeat, it would be a ceremony. This calculated restraint would produce something miraculous. Because Zoro isn't winning every fight in one move, the crew would still struggle, they'd still grow, but now, in the moments that matter most, Zoro would be there as an invisible safety net. At Eni's lobby, when the crew is overwhelmed by CP9 and things go sideways, Zoro's King of Hell techniques, held in reserve, could tip a hopeless fight into survival without completely removing the drama. At Thriller Bark, instead of absorbing all of Luffy's pain to the point of near death, a Zoro with full hockey mastery could survive it cleanly, stand up, and deliver that iconic "nothing happened" line with a small smile, because this time he actually means it without any fear behind it. The real divergence would come at Marineford. In the original story, Zoro wasn't even there. Kuma sent him to Kuraigana Island, but a Reborn Zoro would have never let that happen. He'd have kept his foot at Sabaody through sheer mastery of observation hockey, staying one step ahead of Kizaru. He'd reach Marineford, and standing on that battlefield, with Ace's execution countdown ticking, he'd be a Zoro who already knows what Aki Inu's about to do, and would position himself precisely where he needs to be. Not to steal the moment from Luffy, but to make sure Luffy doesn't have to carry the weight of Ace's death alone. He wouldn't save Ace, he'd know saving Ace there with the Marines and the Admirals in full force would cost too many lives, but he'd be ready for the moment platform crumbles, ready to pull Luffy out of the aftermath faster, less damage, with less of that bottomless grief that sent the original Luffy into a 2-week catatonic breakdown. A Luffy who grieves but isn't shattered would resume training faster. The 2-year time skip might become 18 months, and the crew that reunites would be tighter, fiercer, and better prepared for the new world than they ever were in the original story. A Zoro who'd spent the entire journey sharpening Enma with perfect patience, not because he needed to unlock its power, but because he was choosing exactly when to reveal it, would arrive at Onigashima already forged into something beyond the original. When he faces King, there's no desperate awakening in the middle of a fight. The King of Hell steps forward, already crowned. King goes down faster, Zoro reaches the rooftop where there's still time to help against Kaido. The toll on Luffy's body would be less devastating, and when the morning comes and Kaido finally falls, Wano's liberation would be louder, cleaner, and more complete. But what if instead of Zoro, it was Luffy who regained his memories instead? And what would happen to the original story? Well, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next video.